Broadcasting from lovely Haebangchon, Yongsan-gu, in the heart of Seoul, Korea, we are the Expat Pundits. I'm Kevin Heintz.
And I'm Drew McKenna.
And we are here to bring you the latest in the wild world of U.S. politics and other countries' politics. We'll be here covering the latest events and things we find interesting, maddening, thrilling, and altogether bewildering going on back in our homeland. But first, I think we should introduce ourselves. Drew, who are you and what are you doing here?
Oh, that's a good question. Who am I? What am I doing here? Well, in the United States, I was a history teacher. But to keep a long story short, I've decided to make a career change, and now I'm teaching English here in South Korea, and I'm really enjoying my ESL career. But when I was in the United States, I was very active in politics. Did a little bit of campaigning for Obama in 2008. Actually got paid for it for a little while. Didn't last very long. And then in 2016, I worked really hard for Bernie Sanders. And it was great that he won the Michigan primary. That was one of my most satisfying moments working as a campaign volunteer. But like I said, my true passion was, teaching English abroad, and so that's why I'm here in Korea. And it's a little bit tough. I do have this passion for politics still and current events, and being away, you kind of maybe don't get the exact feel for it like you would being home. But we keep up the best we can. And one thing I do is I like to go on social media and Facebook a lot and read articles and make a lot of posts. But that can only do so much. And now we're going to take it a step further. And we're not just going to do Facebook posts anymore. We're actually going to talk more in depth about these issues in this podcast forum. So I'm really excited about it. So glad to be working with you, Kevin. So why are you here in South Korea? Why the hell are you here? You've been here a lot longer than I have. So let's hear your story.
Altogether, maybe so. I think you might have taken a good route. But I've stayed here since 2009. Been teaching English. If anybody's listening from South Korea or a lot of other Asian countries around the world and around Asia, we probably have similar stories. Came to Asia to teach English and ended up staying and teaching English, and now I'm married and doing other things. And as with you, I guess I've been only seeing U.S. through the lens of social media and all other kinds of media, so I haven't had the chance to experience it for myself beyond a couple of times home, just a few weeks in total. So yeah, I think this has been the only chance with you to actually get a voice out into the airways. Recently I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and just a ton of YouTube channels that really do a good job of dissecting all the pieces. And I guess I wanted a piece of that and to make my voice heard and see if we can contribute anything interesting. And because we live in another country, there hasn't been, to my mind, any show that I've seen, at least on like Apple Podcast or on YouTube, that is a regular analysis of politics from the perspective of being outside the country. So I think maybe some of what we need to do on the show, we'll see how it goes, but some of what we need to do is maybe see what's going on in this country, and we have a lot to compare because we live in another country. We can see the U.S. through a different lens, and maybe that will be interesting.
Yeah, definitely a lot of things we can talk about. Just looking at South Korea, the economy, healthcare,
overthrowing their president.
Yeah, exactly.
If only.
Korea's got its own issues now with minimum wage and income inequality, which we could talk about at some point for sure.
We didn't really say this is our first show and our first time doing podcasts. So if you if you're listening and you have any criticisms about our technical abilities, we're using one mic. We can hear each other breathe and drink beer in this little studio. It's pretty romantic.
Yes, I can hear you breathe.
I can hear you breathe. I can hear you breathe.
Oh, yeah. Breathe on me, Kevin.
Did we tell you we drink a lot of alcohol in Korea? We've joined that cultural.
We do, yes.
Cultural.
Beer, wine, and soju.
I don't drink that stuff anymore.
Yeah. If you want to know what soju is, you just got to come here.
Yeah. You can smell our soju breath through the mic.
Try it for yourself.
So let's start today's show, and we'll just see how it goes. It's January 10th, 2019. The chaotic events we are experiencing in the first 2 weeks of 2019 are manifold, but interconnected. you can almost look at them as having a sort of pyramid structure. The top of the pyramid being the current government shutdown, which is caused by Trump, of course, and the right-wing wacko media's desire for a gigantic wall and a quick $5 billion and no real plan. Or even Congress's refusal to go there, or even to reject outright the idea that they should ransom the funds and give Trump the funds that he's demanding. The timing of the wall being undergirded by the incoming blue wave of Democrats who stand to oppose these kinds of measures. This rests atop this foundation, which, to my mind, is this giant rift in political ideology that we could have been talking about for the last 2 years. But the party tribalism that has become more and more the norm over the past 2 decades has sort of culminated in this singular event of this shutdown. So that's what we'll be talking about in 2019. So welcome, and let's ring in the new circus. So what do you think about the shutdown, Drew? Do you want to break it down? What's happening in your mind? Who's responsible? What's going to happen? I mean, there's 2 minutes. Where do we start with this thing?
Well, obviously, you got to look at Trump first. He talked all through his campaign about this border wall for fears, real or imagined, that Mexican or other Latin American migrants crossing our border are a threat to the safety and well-being of Americans, which we know is not that bad. There's no real dangerous threat from these people. No more than any of your, typical white Americans who also commit crimes. But here or there, we're here at this impasse with the government. Trump he promised in the campaign to build this wall. He said Mexico was going to pay for it, but everyone knew that wasn't really going to happen. And of course, it's now the burden's on the taxpayers. And of course, the new Democratic Congress did not want to give the funding go-ahead for this wall, as they shouldn't. And Trump is being stubborn like he is, even going against several Republican senators and congressmen who were willing to fund the government, at least for a few more months until a possible deal is made. But then, as you might know, Trump kind of backtracked on that promise after hearing Rush Limbaugh and some other right-wing pundits criticize him for kind of caving.
Yeah, who do you think it was that actually pushed him over the edge there? Was it just the culmination? He heard Hannity, and then he heard... I don't know if Hannity was against him.
Well, Rush Limbaugh
Coulter.
for sure. And I lose track of all these
it was like
blonde,
a Jenga.
These blonde... Actually, I shouldn't...
Nazis?
I'm sorry. I shouldn't stereotype like that. But Ann Coulter, Laura...
Ingraham.
Laura Ingraham, yeah.
Do what you will with Fox.
Yeah, that's the thing. Trump gets his advice and policy direction from pundits, and it's a little discouraging. That someone can't make his own judgments and listen to experts or his his congressmen, fellow government officials. He just goes off the whim, basically, getting advice from Twitter and right-wing media, and it's sad and a little frightening when it gets down to it.
Yeah, I've heard a theory today that Trump doesn't actually care about the wall, and that may seem obvious. I think it was Ezra Klein said he's just kowtowing to his base, and it's not the idea that he needs to get the wall is not important. And his reasoning for that position was that if you really want something, it shows not in like how much you continue to ask for it or cry for it or demand it, but in what you're willing to give up. And so far, Trump is willing to give up nothing. And so all he's doing is signaling to this base. I mean, this is almost so obvious it goes without saying, right? But he's not personally invested. He'd love to see the wall built, but he'd rather come off looking like a winner than a loser.
Yeah, then that's ultimately what it boils down to. Mm-hmm. It is a contest, a pissing contest.
It's narcissism.
Exactly, yeah. Trump's got to win, and he'll do it at any cost, and the rest of us be damned. Yeah.
Right, and the consequences of what happens are pretty immaterial, except that he gets to look like a winner, and that's such a... He also said it's a zero-sum game, Ezra Klein said. There's no... A compromise means winning, and the other guy loses. There's no win-win situation. That just doesn't exist in Trump's world.
Exactly. And the sad thing is the losers are, with this government shutdown, over 800,000 government employees who Friday's coming, they're not going to get their paycheck. TSA security workers at airports, supposedly many of them still went to work even though they weren't going to get paid. But now a lot of them are calling in sick and they're not going into work, and I can't blame them.
Yeah.
Because they're not getting paid for it. And so there's going to be some real consequences. Some people are going to get hurt by this financially. And, I mean, there's people who got to pay medical bills. There's people on government assistance programs who aren't going to be getting their government checks. And it's just going to be a slippery slope. It's going to get worse and worse. And, like I said, people are going to get hurt and maybe even die because of this. And, yeah, we can joke about it. We can talk about it. But in the end, it's not really funny.
Yeah, let's talk about the shutdown and as it relates to the wall. As we were trying to build this show before and put it together in about 20 minutes before we came on, we were trying to see how these
professionals.
There's so much going on, even the professionals have a hard time, and they have days and days to work on these things, but they still can't get their heads around everything. It's just a circus. But I want to maybe talk about the wall in the context of the shutdown and how these two interact, and maybe I can just say some facts about it. As of this recording, January 10th, the shutdowns lasted 20 days, and there seems to be no end. That's going to be the longest shutdown since 1995.
Yep.
And in 95, actually, what happened was Clinton had refused to sign a funding bill that, for the reasons being that it would not give funds to Medicare and Medicaid or welfare, something like that. It was a moral stance. And Trump is pretending to take a moral stance. But there was so much pressure that after 21 days, the Republicans folded and they lost that fight. And I guess we know those facts. We know that there's going to be pain from this. Maybe we should just talk about our personal predictions, because that's more interesting to have a sort of bet. Drew, how long do you think this is going to go on, and how do you think it's going to end?
I really have no idea how long this is going to go on.
Look in your crystal ball.
My crystal ball. Boy, I don't even, it's so bad, I don't even want to think about it. I know I should come out with a concrete date or amount of time, but...
Yeah, we need to be making bets here.
I mean, we talk about, this whole thing's a shit show, and as I've heard in some other podcasts, it literally is a shit show in our national parks.
Oh, that's right.
They've also been shut down. But an interesting thing I heard was when the government was shut down during Obama's administration, he shut down the national parks. And actually, Trump criticized him for that. Mm-hmm. Oh, why are you shutting down the national parks? And well, the reason he did that was is because the parks can't be staffed during the shutdown. Oh, so there's no one there to maintain the parks or clean them up.
Sounds like a party.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what's going on.
Kids hanging from cliffs with no rangers to come pick them up.
Yeah, there you go. There's your idea, kids, right there. Yep.
Party in the park. Oh, there's probably like hundreds of kids partying right now in some of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or anybody just going in and so you see the pictures on the news, all the trash dumpsters overflowed. I guess there actually is shit all over the place. Porta potties are overflowing, and it's just a disaster. And I mean, it's so funny because even at the beginning when Trump became elected, everyone's like, "Oh, great! We're going to turn into the Back to the Future 2 America." When Biff was, well, he wasn't president, but he was a big CEO tycoon or whatever. Basically, ran the country how he saw fit, and that's what we're starting out with right now. I mean, with all the shit in the national parks and a lot of other things that aren't going to be happening.
If you want my prediction, I can't predict either. I'm not going to be arrogant to say like how this will end. But what I hear other people saying is basically the prediction amongst the experts is that the Senate and the House of Representatives are going to bypass Trump, and he will end up pushing for an emergency spending bill or a national emergency or both. Mm-hmm. And either way, he'll be pitted against the judges. If the judges reject his national emergency funds, then he'll be able to use them as a scapegoat. So as long as he doesn't look like a loser, as long as he looks like a fighter. So I don't anticipate that this shutdown will last much longer, because in all seriousness, this is the longest it's been, right? As of tomorrow. So,
sure.
The national parks, they've lost $7.3 million in revenues. And but in all seriousness, the TSA is getting pretty pissed off. And it's not just the TSA, it's the people who check the engines before the airplanes leave the tarmac.
So
there's like some...
Basically, it's not 100% safe to fly anymore.
Where the terrorists come in?
I would be concerned, yeah.
Are they coming in through the border, or are they coming in on deltas, from
Yeah, that's the thing.
everywhere else?
There really is no crisis.
Are there terrorists?
There is no terrorist crisis of people coming from Mexico, whether they're Mexicans or there's even reports that there's people from ISIS. They come to Mexico and then get into America through there. There's been a couple cases, sure, but it's not the drastic threat that people are making it out. And it's just sad. It really is all these falsehoods that are being spread and believed, which talks about even the wider problem of our culture. We do have this fearful culture, and we're believing the propaganda.
True.
And yeah, of course, people will crucify me for saying this, but this is how situations started out in 1920s Italy with fascism and Benito Mussolini and the rise of the National Socialist Party and the Nazis and
but that turned out
Hitler
all right
in Germany.
Right? Everything turned out all right in the end.
Yeah, sure did. After
just had to go through some pains.
Germany's the largest economy in Europe now. Yeah, it turned out fine.
Yeah, and this is
Everybody
the end, right?
loves
It can't
Italy.
get bad again.
Right.
Nothing bad can happen because
Not at all.
it's the end of history. Everything's stable now thanks to capitalism. So on the larger, we all know this Trump's speech yesterday now, was it, in Korea? We're 15 hours ahead, 16 hours ahead in Korea here.
Did you watch that speech, Kevin?
I flipped it on. I was at work and I caught it on YouTube. Because it was on every network, I was just like, Trump speech, typed it into YouTube and it came up on NBC. Caught it right in the middle, and just as one of the pundits had predicted, I think it was Chapo or someone, they had said that the speech is going to be like the Willie Horton meets a WMD speech. So you got this combination of xenophobia, racism, fear-mongering, like sort of a deep resentment and fear of the other, mixed with this national crisis of the utmost urgency. And it was exactly that. But it was more graphic than I thought. It was definitely written by Stephen Miller, the American Carnage.
Yes. No, don't get me started on that guy.
Yeah, I mean, so Trump's talking about how they're going to cut your head off, and he didn't say they. He said this happened to this woman. This other woman is raped. This other woman had her head bashed in. Just like, what picture are you trying to paint here? It's like a snuff film. And
what nationality was Jeffrey Dahmer or John Wayne Gacy?
I think he was from Ethiopia. They were from originally they're from Africa, like 3 million years ago. Yeah.
Or from Nicaragua or something like that.
And then by way of Wisconsin and Illinois.
White people never do these things.
Yeah, they
white
lost their
people
middle
never
name in Wisconsin.
commit crimes. They never commit domestic abuse.
Only the
anything
serial
like that.
kings. Only the mass shootings. That's it.
Yeah.
Those are okay as long as you don't do things because of poverty or drugs.
Yeah, it's their right. It's their right to have those guns. So. Yep.
But to play the devil's advocate, this does bring up the bigger issue of illegal immigration, which both Republicans, Democrats, Independents have all said is an issue. I mean, you said earlier, and I agree with you, that it's not a pressing issue, and there's a lot of benefit that comes from it. But it also is something that we need to resolve for a number of reasons. And I just wonder if there could be any sort of problem. I mean, does it hurt the Democrats' position to reject the idea of a wall per se that some of these people seem to be in support of in a similar way back in the 2000s? Or what's the difference between 2019 and 2005?
Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned this reminds me of actually when I was in college. Is my freshman year, I remember, and I was a political science major, and it was in the late 90s, and that was the issue, illegal immigration. Actually, it was more at its peak. And I hadn't really thought about the issue, being an 18-year-old, too much. I was smoking and drinking like everybody else, but, in class we started talking about this, and I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, maybe we should just build a wall or put military people.
Easy choice, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Build a wall, that's
but,
all you gotta do.
I was young, and, didn't think about it too hard. But then I remember, actually, one of my classmates said, well, actually, we should actually make the immigration process a little bit easier. These people want to come in, we'll let them come in legally through certain programs and channels, and then they can, get to work and become citizens. We can actually make the process easier.
That's a catch-22. because
Why?
because from either side, so I mean for a libertarian, that's a difficult decision, right? Because either you have big government creating a wall spending $5 billion, or you have big government creating a program. So you gotta say, obviously they hate programs worse. They're okay with concrete and, you know, those sort of like tactile things, roads. But, you know, program, how could a program work? It's too humane, you know? And
yeah,
I think
exactly.
And that's the way it used to be in the before the 90s. There was such a free flow of people. Day laborers, they would actually come through, you know, Juarez into El Paso, and they would work and they'd go back to their families that day or that week, and there was no issue. But it was only when they set up this fence that there started being permanent migration. And this, you didn't have remittances because they would work, or they'd take it back. They wouldn't wire it back. But, you know, they didn't stay. And the economy, hey, lo and behold, since 2000, the Mexican economy's improved, and they went back to Mexico. What does that tell you about our shitty, you know, proto-capitalist policies that hurt Mexican farmers and Mexican economy? Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should help their economy flourish. Hey, maybe we should apply the similar policies to El Salvador and Honduras and Guatemala so we don't get those refugees. Now the big crisis is the refugees.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Kevin's talking about is throughout history, maybe even going back to the 60s, 70s, and up through the 80s, and, you know, Guatemala, El Salvador, there were some democratically elected communist leaders of those countries, but during the Cold War, the United States wanted to suppress communism, so they gave lots of weapons and sent down lots of military aid to some rebel groups or other groups, and they... that
was Nicaragua too, right? That was Reagan's baby. Panama.
Yep. So they overthrew these elected officials who just happened to be communist, and they installed brutal dictators who murdered a lot of their citizens. And of course, when there's a brutal dictator, that's not a very stable government because someone's going to want to overthrow them. So all these countries have been in such turmoil, and when there's no stable government, that's when the drug cartels come in and, you know, send in they make their own order, play by their own rules, with corruption and whatnot, and they basically rule the show.
Those drug cartels are filling in a vacuum for that lack of leadership, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
I don't really know the history of how those things started, but
and you know, if you do anything to cross the drug cartels, you're dead basically. And so that's why a lot of these people are fleeing these Latin American countries, coming up through Mexico to try to find a better life because of things that the United States government set in motion.
I just love that how Coulter paints this situation. She portrays it as, she says, they're not refugees fleeing violence, they're economic opportunists, they're economic migrants, as if,
well,
you know, if you live in squalor, first of all, she doesn't know, she wouldn't care anyways,
right?
But it's just, well, we don't need to get into the many ways that she's wrong and dastardly, but
I think enough people, you know, don't think about that. I mean, these people are coming from some very dangerous, some real life-threatening situations.
What is the reason why they don't stay in Mexico? I mean, that's a question that many people might ask.
Oh, you ever watch Narcos, Kevin? you ever watch the news, see all these murders of American tourists or anybody else because of the drug cartels and the sway and power they hold? That's
not something that is dissuading people from Honduras.
It's not the whole picture, of course, but
I wonder, they bypassed Mexico. I think a lot of them do stay. I wonder if it's just they say, well, we're going to go 1,000 miles. We might as well go to the really good place. Is that, you think that's the goal? I'm actually curious about the psychology of
that's
that
true.
Kind of migration.
I mean, but that says something. I mean, you know, these migrants, they know what's happening, and it's not going to be an easy entry into the United States, but it's a lot better than what they're coming from. Yeah. And I sincerely believe that, and I know that's true from the accounts that I've read. And,
you know, the terrorists, it's pretty good time to get into that caravan, you know? Just hop on the caravan and, just super easy, right?
It's all those ISIS members and Mexicans who are shooting up our schools and movie theaters.
It's pronounced ISIS.
ISIS.
Don't hate me for that, anybody, please.
There you go. We're going to get some calls from the Middle Eastern listeners. If we had a lot of Middle Eastern and viewers from all over the world, listeners from all over the world, that would be great, actually.
Well, depends where we put this up.
I digress, though.
Got to do something shocking first. Something to get us in trouble. Let's not do that. I saw a speech today by Trump. It was back in 2004, and I don't know if it was Wharton School. I don't know if they let him back. It was he was given the keynote speech at some graduation ceremony, which is insane. It kind of blew my mind, but he said...
Oh, back then, yeah.
He was talking about how never let anything stop you in life, and his metaphor was the wall. So he said, in life, if you will encounter many walls, big concrete walls, don't let them stop you. Go around them. Go under them. Tunnel through them. Don't let the wall stop you. Never, ever, ever.
Never, ever give up. Don't give up. Don't allow it to happen. If there's a concrete wall in front of you, go through it. Go over it. Go around it. But get to the other side of that wall.
I don't know if that was overdubbed.
Completely contradictory, which Trump does all the time.
Well, I think he was telegraphing to the migrants today to go through his wall and come work at Trump golf courses.
Yeah, exactly.
He's playing the long game.
It's a subliminal message there. Yeah, playing the long game. Exactly. Yeah.
Because he has a few migrants at his golf courses.
The illegal immigrants at Mar-a-Lago, they're not being deported. They've actually been shielded a few times by Secret Service. The ICE people don't get to them. Yeah.
I think that's kind of sweet.
It is.
He must have at least one gardener or housekeeper that he sort of, thinks she's okay.
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, maybe not. Maybe he just thinks she makes his bed really well, and
so you got to keep her.
Got to keep her. Yeah.
Exactly.
There's no personal affection beyond physical attraction or what can she do for me.
Right. The 2019 speech I just made. I remember, reading on Facebook, my Facebook friends, some saying they actually weren't going to watch it, they're going to boycott it, and that's definitely the best thing to do, I think. I wanted to say that, but you know me, I'm one of those guys, you see that car wreck on the side of the road, you're driving by, you turn your head to check it out.
Yeah, so, they're still dead.
And at my work day at school, it was coming on about, I think, 11 o'clock, so I wasn't going to be able to watch it in real time. But
11 in the morning, right?
Yep, yeah. 11 in the morning here in Seoul. And my fourth period class gets over at 11:20. Actually, no, my third period class gets over at 11:20, so I went to my computer and turned on YouTube. I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch this. And I only watched it about 3 minutes, and it just made me sick, all the lies, so I turned it off. But one of the things that really caught me was, it sounds like from what he said, like all the illegal drugs in the United States, the heroin, marijuana, fentanyl, he even mentioned, they're all coming through the Mexican border.
Right,
all our drugs are coming from Mexico, illegally.
1,000%.
They're getting in.
1,000%.
I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. It's just, I can't take those lies.
What's the facts on that, right? I mean, the New York Times had a fact. They checked all his facts.
Sure. Yeah, and that's one of the things we miss not being home to, look at all these other, TV stations, watching the news or other networks while this speech is going on to see what's happening.
Yeah, I was able to watch it on YouTube, and it was just NBC.
After the fact, yeah.
No, it was during the...
You watched it live?
It was live, yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Which is probably when you were watching it, too. Or you watched
it it was about half hour after.
They streamed it on...
It was only a 9-minute speech.
Right,
too, which
yeah.
And I thought would be bearable. I couldn't even make it 9 minutes. That's how bad it was.
I saw some people commenting afterwards, I commented, impeach the motherfucker just because, you could hear Stephen Miller's voice in it and just all the sort of not lies, but just there's half lies and there's conflations and taking things out of context. So when the New York Times fact-checked it, it wasn't like false, false, false. It was like, this needs context. This is kind of true. This needs context. This needs context.
Exactly.
It's like anything can be true if you put it in if you frame it the wrong way,
Yeah. Well, one of the reports I saw from some fact-checking is that, with the drugs coming from Mexico, they're actually coming through the checkpoints at the border. So they're coming through legally, actually. They're not being, smuggled or, snuck across the border. They're coming through, like you see in the movies, the trucks or the big vans hiding, or maybe through some planes as well.
And that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, exactly. So, which is something a wall is not going to have any effect on. So,
if you think about it, well, unless you take Steve King, Representative Steve King.
Oh, that's your guy from Iowa, right?
Shitbag. Yeah, cantaloupe calves. He said, "You seen these illegal immigrants walking through the desert? They got cantaloupe calves calves the size of cantaloupes because they're hauling 50 kilos of cocaine. So he's never obviously been to the Arizona desert and walked 200 miles in the desert. And yeah, if you can just strap on drugs to a car, we've all seen Breaking Bad. You know, why would you send an illegal immigrant who's automatically suspect to die in the desert? You're going to have your 50 kilos of coke just sitting out in the desert?
Yep.
You'd be a maniac. I mean, it's just, it's lunacy when you stop and think about it for just 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It really makes you angry that people fall for it.
It really does, yeah.
Stupid people.
Just makes me think, you know, as I read more and more history as I got older, or watching some, you know, historical fiction movies, like, you know, reading about, like, Henry VIII, and, you know, he just cut off a lot of people's heads just for some really stupid shit. They didn't even do anything, and they lost their lives.
I don't know now, Drew. I don't know.
Well, I mean, and that's what's happening here. All this stuff is happening based on these lies, based on bullshit. And like I said, this government's being shut down. People are losing their paychecks. You know, people who need to pay for their prescriptions for their insulin if they have diabetes or cancer treatments. It's not going to happen. This, you know, this could be life or death. And because of this stupid fucking border wall being the reason, like if I had a family member who was going to die because they couldn't get to work to earn money to pay for their treatments, it's, you know, it's bad. Unconscionable in the United States of America.
That just begins
anywhere.
to describe it. It's like when you hear about police killings, you know, it's not just unconscionable because they killed someone. It's the fact that they have the full force, the power of the law behind them. They have the responsibility that we give them, I mean, trust to them. And then they even have like the district attorneys that support those police that do these things, which makes it so much more maddening that it happens because they're the ones that are not supposed to be doing it. They're the ones that are supposed to be following what the people want. So when a politician just lies to you like that, and not to say that Trump's the only one, he's just like the mountaintop. You know, they're doing it all the time, and they're doing it in more subtle ways.
Well, this border wall is not very subtle, though. It's not subtle at all. Everyone knows.
It's absurd. Yeah, it's just...
Which maybe gives me a little bit of hope that this government shutdown will end eventually. I think Trump, you know, could cave.
Let's make a prediction. Just quick, so we can mark it later.
I'm going to say March 31st.
March 31st?
Yeah.
How do you think it'll end, though? Is it Trump says,
I'm not sure.
Wall? Or he says, well, we can build a fence. That's a wall, right? Because he's turned the wall into a fence by that time.
Maybe just a lot more money for border security that he'll live with. And then he'll say he tried to get the wall, but the stupid Democrats wouldn't let him, and he'll live with that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is unprecedented, so I can't really fault anybody for not being able to predict what'll happen. It's very difficult for me because I know how stubborn Trump is, and you know, I do respect how, you know, strong he is going to be to get this wall.
I would say stubborn, but also...
stubborn and stupid, too.
Extremely...
delusional. I mean, it's all stuff we know, though, too. It's really no surprise.
He's extremely capricious, too. So, I mean, like, he could easily change his mind tomorrow and say, that's what I was arguing for the whole time. All I wanted to do was for the Democrats to give me $1.3 billion. He could just say, oh, they gave me what I wanted. That's what I wanted. Like, just... change history.
We can only hope. He's done it before.
I hope so. I hope his... Yep. I mean, he's sort of a monster, but he's not smart. He's not evil enough. He's just narcissistic. You know, if he's evil, maybe he could stick with the fascism. But he doesn't have that sort of tenacity.
Right.
So
true.
My prediction is that it's going to end within a week. Because once this first paycheck comes in, it's going to be fucking chaos. I think... no one's seen it before. This has never happened to where the workers did not get their first paycheck. In 1 million government workers, just imagine the biggest strike you've ever seen. And if it doesn't happen in 2 weeks, it'll be another 2. And I don't think that's sustainable. I just think it. And it's. I don't want them to get hurt, but I kind of want that sort of to come to a head, to people to see like everyone's against you.
Well, that's why I gave it a little bit more time. After a few months, there'll be enough people. Yeah, enough government workers who are going to go on strike.
Enough shit on the ground.
Yeah, enough shit on the ground in the parks. Yeah, I don't want to think about it.
Well, hopefully
tragedies are kept to a minimum.
Our Christian values come through, and we start opening up soup kitchens for all the poor government workers that can't pay mortgages.
Oh yeah, all these good Christian Trump supporters, they're going to take care of all those furlough
We
government
don't
workers.
need the government to pay
Yeah,
government
what
salaries.
were we thinking? Yeah, they got it covered.
What were they thinking? I've actually heard that on Facebook. Some guy said,
Just like people.
This is what happens when you work for the government. Like, it's their fault because they work for the government.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a, what is it, self-fulfilling prophecy or circular logic? Right?
No, just like President Hoover said in the late 20s, people will come together and volunteer and help each other out to get through the hard times.
Did he say that?
At first he did.
I want to start the show with that quote.
Yep.
That sounds great.
Yeah, well, I could find one for sure. And then, of course, all the good Christian Trump supporters, they're going to help out all the government workers who are falling on hard times because they're good, decent people.
So let's ask our listening audience, what do you think, folks? If it hasn't shut down already, that's why we got to get this up fast. Because if it hasn't opened up already, the government, that is, then what do you think? What's going to happen? Or let's make a new prediction. When's Trump going to get indicted? Could have it weekly.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we talked about that at the top of the show. With everything.
Impeach the motherfucker.
Yep, exactly.
Indict
with the border wall and the government shutdown, a lot of the new members of Congress, especially the Democrats, are being very vocal. They're speaking loudly and speaking often on normal news outlets and on social media about their displeasure, not just with Trump, but with military-industrial complex and capitalism writ large, that we need some major changes, and they want to get the ball rolling.
The corporate Democrats are getting faced with a lot of backlash too, and I think this is going to be the new, when we discuss 2020, we discuss the future, first we have to see where the party's at, and I think this is going to be a sort of a rehash of 2016, but you're going to get a lot more support on the progressive side because of these new voices, because of this leftist wave. The right wing's going to try to demonize the AOCs and the Bernies and, I don't know, Elizabeth Warren even, and they're going to support, in the corporate Dems are going to support, I'm not going to bash anybody at this point because I want to have a Dem, but at the same time, I mean, you're already seeing nasty ads against Bernie Sanders. Yeah, so I know this is a whole nother issue. It's another side of the coin, but I mean, going back to like what you're saying, the new class and the Dems in general, how do you think they're going to react to Trump? I mean, to me, that's interesting because they're not united yet, but they're united when it comes to Trump. But like,
well, they sure are.
What are they going to proceed and what are the things to look for?
Well, one of the points of contention I've heard among corporate Democrats and the progressive Democrats is whether the impeachment should even be an issue because of all the division it's going to cause. It'll bog legislation down where maybe we don't focus on more pressing issues. They're going to help the American people. But I think Bernie Sanders had a pretty good quote. He said, well, we can definitely walk and chew gum at the same time.
I think he was the first one to say that.
He was, yeah.
Ever.
Yep. I mean, of course, we can try to enact some progressive policies, but also, Trump definitely needs to be investigated, through his shady works and with his campaign and his former businesses, and, of course, the ties with Russia. Those all need to be investigated, and, well, of course, Mueller's been doing that for the last couple of years, it seems. And, the indictments have been coming to former campaign officials and business partners.
Witch hunt, just a big witch hunt, man.
Yep. Hey, they're getting some witches, though, aren't they?
No evidence against Trump at all.
Michael Flynn, Manafort.
No infection of my body, just all of my blood cells. But not my body.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's... actually is this whole shutdown. It's a pretty big distraction of the Mueller investigation.
You got it.
Yeah, I haven't even thought about that before, but it's true. We're not... I mean, it was getting pretty close. I mean, we keep hearing, Mueller's getting closer and closer to bringing the case against Trump.
This is still...
We're not even talking about it now. It's kind of funny.
In this investigation, if you go back to that division within the left, or within the Democrats, you have the leftist Democrats. I like that word now. I'm going to embrace it. Leftist. I call myself a leftist.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be like...
All Democrats used to be leftist.
Just sound like... Yeah, but just the word leftist, it's just... The Republicans love to say it because it sounds very sinister and Marxist, racist. We like to say racist on the regressive
Socialist,
side. Socialist, yeah.
Extremist.
Right, right. But
libtard.
with That's got a different roundness to the end. Libtards and extremists. I have many friends on social media who are very leftist, Jill Stein voters, etc., or just progressive people who don't think that the Russian issue is a big deal, and they actually think if you talk about it, if you listen to like Jimmy Dore or the radical progressives, or like even Kyle Kulinski, those guys, they are really good, but when you touch the Russia, they're like, this is such a fucking waste of time. Like, but I don't know. I think like you should let it play out, but I think it's because the media. I don't want to sound like 1994 Rush Limbaugh, but the media is just sort of shaping public perception about so many issues, and that's what's going to happen in this next 2020 campaign.
Yeah. I mean, the whole Russian involvement in the 2016 election.
They're just hammering it, They're hammering the shit.
I don't want to downplay or belittle Russians, involvement in, their impact on social media with all their hackers spreading mixed messages that are riling up the people, and the other things they've done, making campaign contributions,
but
helping out Trump and also many other Republican senators. Yeah, that needs to be looked at. But I also don't think the Democratic Party should use it as an excuse to, as why they lost.
Oh,
that's why they lost.
I don't know who does. That's the weird thing. I don't know who actually says that. I mean, I hear that said about them by Republicans and conservatives, like, you're sad that Hillary's lost because of Russia. I mean, like, I just don't hear people blaming Russia for that, like, in my circles or in openly in public. I mean...
Well, not too much, no. But if you talk about... But people who say, oh, well, actually, we shouldn't, only look at Russia's involvement, or we shouldn't, blame, the Russian involvement that much. But then they say, oh, yeah, it's a little bit of an issue. But when people say, oh, no, we can't, the Democrats need to look at their own failures, and they say, oh, no, it's, Russia did have,
that's true.
Some involvement. Yeah.
It's like
you get criticized from both sides.
It's like a defense mechanism.
Yep.
And I can see both sides. Actually, I can't really see the centrist, corporatist, whatever, establishment argument so much because it's so thick. It's so dumb. It's so like, let's just totally not. And then they look at Bernie and they'll be like, oh, this guy's too far left. He's radical. Instead of actually looking at his policies and saying like, oh, well, maybe this one is a little bit more than me, but like these other ones, that's where the most of Americans are. And but those are the people who the right calls NPCs, the non-player characters that just they just listened and followed and blah blah, and they just repeat what everybody else says. I think it's that kind of mentality that like, well, I'm supporting this candidate because she's the moderate. She's the one that I know the best. The people that can do no wrong because they don't make waves and they're on TV a lot. And that's what Hillary was.
Right.
And not to say Hillary was, well, she's a shit candidate because she lost. But I mean, she had a lot of experience,
Yep.
But
wasn't a great candidate in a lot of ways.
Why didn't we like her? Was all sexism?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, people have rehashed this election.
Yeah, let's do another post-mortem.
Yeah, I don't. Do we have to?
No, never mind.
But talking about some of these talking points that Republicans or conservatives have against the left, saying, oh, Bernie's a socialist. Goes back to this old Cold War rhetoric. Comparing equating socialism to Stalinist Russia, and that's just not really the case. And the encouraging thing is a lot of young people now, millennials, whether you want to criticize them or not, when they hear the word socialism, they think more of democratic socialism and think of countries in Europe like France, Germany, the Scandinavian countries whose economies are booming, businesess booming.
Venezuela.
Yep, I know. Well, that's what the conservatives will counterattack with. Oh, look at, you want to turn us into Venezuela or North Korea.
Venezuela.
But a lot of people are tuning out that argument now, as they should.
Well, yeah, it's just like the reason that it's the same people that say Venezuela is socialism are the same people that say the Nazis are socialist. And the same people that say the Democrats...
Obama was a Nazi.
The Democrats were for slavery. It's like if you divorce everything from its context and you don't put it in context, then it's suddenly true. Like, because it was the National Socialists.
Fine. That's too hard, though, Ken. That's too hard. Put stuff in context.
It is
you don't
hard.
Need to do that.
It's,
I know what I know.
Yeah,
like Bernie's
true.
a socialist. He wants to make us like Venezuela. That's all there is to it.
We do that. I mean, every side does that. I don't ever, even though we're both leftist, I like this new movement. I mean, I know many people hate it because there's like infighting, but I think if there can be sort of a common understanding, a more economic arguments, if there can be not as much money in politics, I think the left can understand that it needs to work together and it needs to stop being so obsessed with personality and centrism and the Obama thing happened, but if we gravitate towards that sort of anti-Trump person, as in like this woman, this man is so decent in the way they speak, and just the opposite of Trump, like that's not what we want. We need someone, regardless of their character, who has good policy.
Or regardless of age.
Regardless of age, regardless of sex,
regardless of his political leanings, regardless of the color of his hair,
even if he's a ginger.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or even if he's
Kevin Heintz for president.
Or even if he's a Jew from Vermont, can still be a great candidate.
Ah, you're talking about Jorny Schroenders, right?
Jorny Schroenders.
Schroenders.
Yes.
I think global warming is one of the things we have to worry about.
Yep.
I moved to New Hampshire.
Jorny Schroenders.
Jorny Schroenders. Yep. Is that even? That's not a name, right? Jorny.
I'm sure it is somewhere. The real Jorny Schroenders is going to call us here.
Will the real Jorny Schroenders please stand up? Please stand up. Boy, please stand up. Hey, so we didn't make it back to Trump, but I wonder if maybe we should end by just telling you listeners to give us your ideas, because we're sort of finding our legs here. We don't really have any experience. We don't know what we're doing.
Not really, yeah.
So so if we get more ideas for what you want to hear, or we might find our own that are more interesting. And
definitely, I'm just going to throw it out there. One of the podcasts I have listened to recently, actually Kevin gave me the recommendation, was it was a 16-part podcast called The Wilderness.
Excellent.
Hosted by Jon Favreau, former speechwriter for President Obama. And he commented on and outlined basically the history of the Democratic Party to its founding, and its founding with the election of Andrew Jackson in 1820. Then, of course, all through the 19th and 20th centuries, and then up to, through Obama, and then, of course, the dreaded 2016 election. Actually, I spent a lot of time on the 2016 election, the lead up to it, and then, the election night and how bad everyone felt. And then the aftermath, everyone criticizing each other, what went wrong. But then really, going in depth and going around the country talking to voters and policy experts and other people, just getting their opinions on what the Democratic Party can do to get out of this wilderness and, be a prominent force in American politics in 2020 and beyond. Yeah, he really takes it from the beginning to the end, and as Drew said, it's that complete. It's really good. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for like a good historical breakdown of the party, what it stands for, he uses the word big tent a lot. We're the big tent party. And he doesn't just leave it out there. He sort of explains what that means. And like Pod Save America guys get crapped on a lot by some more leftist shows because they're kind of hopey-changey, centrist. I don't know. I mean, me personally, I think they're a great show because they're on the same side, and they seem to be willing to listen to any arguments, like even if they're further left than the if you don't know, Pod Save America is Jon Favreau's regular podcast. That he does, probably 4 or 5 days a week. I think it's twice a week, once or twice a week. Yeah. Okay. It depends on the season. And of course, The Wilderness was a special podcast he did on the side there. So definitely after you listen to our podcast, why don't you check them out too? I think they are the biggest political podcast in the U.S. because they used to have a show. They used to have a show called Keeping It 1600 because they all worked for Obama, so they got all these connections. Yep. They're much more well spoken than us, but hey, I think we're doing all right. Yeah, for our first time. Yeah, I mean, I'm relatively new to listening to podcasts regularly, so same here. Yeah, this has been great. Thanks for listening. Like I said, it's a lot better than just doing the old Facebook posts. We get to come at you and have some real discussions. Go into a lot more depth in a lot of these issues. It'd be great to get some feedback from you too. What you think about maybe comparative politics if you're listening
from another country, and we might do a lot of that, comparing, because, Bernie Sanders, as we've been talking about, is one who likes to use models a lot. So maybe it'll be good for us to look at economic healthcare models, or models that you can base your own countries on to improve or to do better in the future.
We'll definitely be looking at South Korea here where we live in, a lot of other countries as well.
If only they had weed here, man.
I know. That wasn't an issue in the last election.
I think medical marijuana is legal here.
Oh, man, okay.
Go ahead. Quick, get cancer.
Better late than never.
All right, so this has been Kevin Heintz.
And this is Drew McKenna.
And we are Expat Podcast. What is
Expat
Expat Podcastists. Podcastists.
Podcast Pundits.
Podcast Expatists.
Expat Pundits.
Expat Pundits. See ya.
Have a good night.